I think it would serve us better maybe to go back to Beauchamp. And the fact is he was a real deal. He was making inroads in understanding the presence of microbes. They do exist in the external environment, that he demonstrated with his fermentation procedures or experiments that you talked at length about last time. He also found that there were organisms that lived inside of us that were natural ecobionts, or part of our internal ecology, without which life would be impossible for us. And his successor, who I was about to talk about, was Enderlein, Gunther Enderlein. Now, Enderlein just took Beauchamp's understandings a step further, because he actually visualized these creatures and then chronicled their cycles within us. And if you look at nature, everything works in very precise and predictable cycles. Even the human cycle, we go through birth, various stages of maturation and decline. It works that way with the elements in the soil. We can get in more involved discussions about the physics of it, which is where we really need to go, because if you don't understand the physics of it, then you're still going to be in darkness no matter what. So we'll get there. And, that's why I always bring it up, because we really need to go to the next level real quick. Okay, so back to Enderlein. Enderlein coined a term called pleomorphism, because he observed these organisms in our body that he called chondritins, or what I was taught, because I did the old school German training myself in microbiology. We called them protids. And these are like little sparkles of light that you see under a dark field microscope. A dark field microscope allows you to see things in their live form. You don't stain your slide samples, and therefore you can actually see what's going on for real. And these dark field microscopes have gone through different levels of evolution. Certain people like Royal Rife and Gaston Naessens, who we'll talk both about, refined these microscopes so they were able to see things with even better resolution, and therefore come to even better understandings of what we're seeing in the first place. So what Gunther Enderlein was able to demonstrate, that Beauchamp was in fact right, and that it's not the germ that's important, it's the ecology, because depending on the ecology, which means the balance of your health or of your internal ecosystem, that determines what these organisms do. So if your internal environment goes south, in other words, you get less healthy, out of balance in various ways, then what happens is these little helpers, these organisms that do all the important functions for us to exist in a biological form, then they start pleomorphically progressing through different stages. I've watched this myself thousands and thousands of times under the microscope, looking at many people's blood samples. And you see these change from one form to the next form to another form. I have pictures of them sitting here. I'll put some up in a bit. And then when they get to certain phases, it's what present-day medics identify as bacteria, fungi, and so forth. But what they don't appreciate is that those morphologically changed size, shape, and function in order to meet the demands of the environment. So rather than attacking them and circumstantially implementing them because they find them at the scene of the crime of a sore throat or some other so-called infection. Infection is really a misnomer because these organisms are really scavengers or recyclers, just like in the external environment in a natural habitat when, flies and fungi and all sorts of things, get to the scene where there's an old dead animal or some such thing, or decaying plant matter, and help it return to the soil. Well, the same thing's happening in our bodies today. And without these recyclers, or say Streptococcus being at the scene of a sore throat, if we understood, we would be able to take measures to help them do their job. We wouldn't have the sore throat as long, or could even prevent it in the first place, and then be healthier in the long run. In other words, strengthen our natural immunity. So Enderlein was able to visualize the progressions of these organisms through all these stages. And the basis of bioterrain medicine, which I've practiced for decades, is to have ways to assess the body, including microbiology as assessed through a microscope, and understand how to assist these microorganisms and then return them to their non-pathogenic or non-recycler form. So the symptoms go away, but in the process, you get healthier and not sicker because you just went in and napalmed everybody because you say, oh, they must be the bad guys because they were here. And of course, these guys will do things like secrete certain factors that promote inflammation and swelling and oozing of mucosal tissues, which makes you cough and sneeze and have a runny nose and have all sorts of internal issues. But they will not overstay their welcome and provoke those symptoms as long as you allow them to finish their job. Contemporary medicine does not allow them to finish their job. That's why antibiotics have been greatly implemented with cancer, because cancer in and of itself, going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but it's a good illustration, are growths that, if you understand the mechanism, are designed to heal because cellular mass brings in more oxygen through every extra cell that's produced that brings in an extra set of lungs to end fermentation and return the physiology to an aerobic rather than anaerobic state and clean up the body's internal terrain. When they do the job, then these organisms, these recyclers, will digest the extra cells so that they don't keep growing or have the presence of an obstruction or what we think of as a tumor or disease. Now, when you overuse antibiotics, it annihilates these populations in the body, so they're not available when the biological expression of cancer happens, and therefore the tumors cannot be digested. They keep growing, and we have bigger problems. That's just one of the many reasons why cancer is epidemic and why it's so problematic these days. And cancer is not a disease. Microorganisms are not the cause of disease. They do not create infections. They recycle and help clean up our terrain. Gunther Enderlein demonstrated that. That was the basis of my training because that was the early German microbiology school that I went to. And the next person after that was Gaston Naessens, a brilliant man who's still alive today. I studied personally with him. And he developed a somatoscope that was able to see these organisms even in finer detail. And he came up with the same exact thing, only instead of calling them chondrites or protids, as I was trained to call them, he called them somatids. But it's the same exact thing. And when you see pictures of the cycles that he took with his somatoscope, it's the same exact cyclogeny that was demonstrated by Enderlein. They look the same. We all see the same thing. In fact, when I take a blood sample, what I do is I have developers, which are these organisms in the protid form of all the ones that live inside of us. So if I'm wondering, okay, which organism populations are active, say if I'm seeing the bacterial or advanced fungal forms that are overstaying their welcome and creating problems in the body, in order to treat them effectively, I need to know, are they from the, Mucorracimosis, aspergillus, from one of the penicillin varieties, Candida variety. And then what I do is I put these protids from all those different strains within the blood interacts, and depending on which one interacts, then you see an outgrowth of all these things in the blood on the instant. I mean, these things in the blood happen instantly. You'll see them go from one phase of the cycle to the next, in a matter of seconds. And then when you put these developers in, and depending which ones are provoking the response, then I know, okay, that gives me more than a clue as far as how I'm going to treat somebody and clean up their terrain, and use isopathics and things that put in the healthy protid variety that will help people strengthen their immunity, clean up the pathogenic forms that are overstaying their welcome, and return the immune system and the ecology to its natural balanced state. But by doing it that way, you're actually getting healthier, you're getting stronger, as opposed to contemporary, shock and awe methods of medicine that just go in and kill everybody, and without any concern of collateral damage.